Okay, so we're following on from the last one where we looked at the for loop. We saw how using the for loop we could repeat something a certain number of times, and that could make the code much shorter. Now there's another reason that you might use a for loop, and that is when you use a for loop it makes a counter for us. I did mention very briefly this I that we have here for I in range, the word that comes after for, the I here is going to be a counter that will count up. So we didn't use it in this program, but we'll find a way that we can use it. I want to keep this program, so I'll make a new one. To make a new one, I could go to the file menu, choose a new file, or I could do the Control N, but perhaps a faster way of doing it, now that I've got this folder open. If I go to Python, we see a little picture of the page here. New file, click on that one. I will call it for loop 2. I'll just call it .py. Maybe I should have called the last one for loop 1, but anyhow. Okay, so let's imagine this problem. Let's suppose we wanted to add up all the numbers from 1 to 1000. Okay, so I'm going to make a little comment so we know what we are doing. To make a comment, you can put in a hashtag. Now, you can write what you want with a hashtag. It doesn't have to be Python code. So let's say add all the whole numbers from 1 to 1000. Okay, so there's different ways that we could do this. Let's find perhaps the most simple way of doing this. We could do this one here. So if I want to write something to the screen, I could write print, and I could do, let's see, 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 plus, no, I'm not going to do this. This is going to be very long if I had to write all the numbers from 1 to 1000. It should work if I did all those numbers, but it would be very, very long to do. And it's also likely if I was to do that something that long, I'd probably make a mistake somewhere along the way. So that's not a very good idea. Now, it might be a good idea if we were to make a variable for the total number. So I'll do total. I should give it a starting value. Let's say 0. And then I am going to make another variable for the number that will count up. I'll call it counter. And I will make that one to begin with. Okay. So I could do it this way. I could say total equals total plus counter. Oops. Let's try that again. Total equals total plus counter. If you want to make that slightly shorter, when you are adding something on to something else, instead of saying total equals total plus something, the same thing you could do total plus equals counter. So what plus equals mean is add counter on to total here. Okay, it does the same but is a bit shorter. Then what I would want to do, I would want to add 1 on to counter. So I will say counter. So again, I could say counter equals counter plus 1. So if counter was 1, I'd add on 1 to it. So counter would then become 2. But again, I could do the shorter version by saying counter plus equals 1. And I could then take a quote total and I could add on the new value of counter. So counter now would be 2, and the total I had before was 1, so I'll be doing the 1 I had before plus 2, and I could keep on going like this. So I'll just copy and paste these 2 lines, copy and paste. So I'm adding 1 to counter each time, and I'm adding it on to total. So let's see what we've got so far. So total starts at 0, counter is 1, total plus equals counter, so total will be 1 at this point. I've just added a counter there. Counter plus equals 1, so counter will now be at 2. I'll add it to the total we've got already, which was 1, which is 3. Counter is now 3, and then I add it on to the total I had already, which was 3, so total will now be 6. So if I was to do this 1,000 times again, I would get the right answer. And I suppose it might be slightly faster than the last one because I could copy and paste several times as opposed to write out the whole thing. But again, it might not be very clear how many times I've actually done it, if you think like the last one as well. So we could do like what we did last time, and instead of doing all of this, we could make a for loop for the things that we are repeating. So what are we repeating? We are repeating as total plus equals counter, and counter plus equals 1. Okay, so now I will do for I in range bracket 1000 colon. Now I have to be quite careful here because no, in fact it should work. Yep, but I in range. So, and what am I going to do? I'm going to add on the counter. I'm going to add 1 to counter and repeat that 1,000 times. So I actually know what the answer should be. It should be 50,500. So I'm going to delete these ones up here that I don't need anymore. And let's print the final answer. So I want to print the total. Okay, so if I do it like that, it's just going to print the total just once at the end, but maybe I want to print the total as we go along. So I could do like that, print total, and it might be useful if I print the counter as well, so I know what number it was adding. I could do print, print the counter. Okay, and yes, perhaps at the very end I want to print the total too. Okay, so one useful thing about print is we could actually print several things at the same time. So I'm going to make this one print like that, and we separate each one with a comma. There we are. So that will print both the total and the counter. It might not be obvious which is which, so it's a good idea if I put a little string before it. Remember, strings are just words that we can write. When we do that and we want to write the actual words and not the name of a variable, we have to use a quotation marks. So I'll just give an introduction. The total so far is... Now, I don't need to put a space at the end of the quotation mark. The print will do that for us. I put a comma in between the string and the value, just like as we did between the two values. And I'll put another one here. I'll say the counter is now... Oops, not more. Now... comma, and then the counter. Okay, and for the final one, I probably want to say that that is the final value of the total, so I know I've reached the end. The final value is, and total. Alrighty, so let's play this code. Here we are. So if I scroll through it, I'm not sure if it will show every line because it was quite a lot of lines there. Sometimes it limits the number of lines that you can do. Let's scroll up. Okay, yeah, there we are. So it starts off at 1 and then the counter is 2. It adds that to the 1 we've got. 3 adds a 3 to 3 we've got so far. 6. Then adds 4 to the 6 to get 10, adds 5 to 10 to get 15, and so on, all the way down to the bottom, where we added... So we didn't actually add 1001, the last number we added was 1000, like we wanted. And if we add 1000 to 499,500, we get 500,500. Okay, so it is right. But we could make this slightly better. Okay, we could reduce one line of code. And it's all because with a for loop we have a counter built into it. So we didn't actually have to write this counter equals 1 or this counter plus equals 1. With a for loop, it will count up the value for us. So I want to delete this. Counter equals 1. Don't worry, we'll give a warning because we haven't described what counter is and we're trying to add it. So counter is the value we want to make in the for loop, so let's do counter. Here, counter. And also we don't need to write plus equals 1, the for loop will add it to us. Anyhow, there we go. And maybe I want to put an empty space there to make it a bit neater. There we are. Okay, so let's just go over what should happen here. In fact, one thing I would want to do is when we do range is it would normally start at 0. We wanted to start at 1. It won't make much difference in this case, but if we want to start at 1, we'd have to do 1 and comma. Okay, and this is where you could quite easily make a mistake. So remember, it doesn't actually reach the last value. So if we wrote 1000 as the last value, it won't reach 1000 and it will stop at 999. So if we wanted to add up all the numbers from 1 to 1000, I'd have to go to 1001. Okay. So let's think what is going to happen when we run this. Counter will take the first value in the range, which is 1 here. Then it will add it to the total. Well, total at the beginning was 0, so we're going to add 1 to 0. Then it will run the for loop again, and counter's going to be 2. And we'll add that to the total we've got already, which is 1. Then we run it again, counter will be 3. And each time it runs through the for loop, it's going to add 1 to the counter, and it will then add the counter to the total. So we don't actually have to tell it to add 1, it will do it for us anyhow. Now let's try running this code in. Oops, something's not right. There we are. Okay, and we get the same answer. Brilliant. Okay, so then that is perhaps a better way of running the code. Use the counter that is built into the for loop if we are going to count things. So I'll show you some fancy things you might want to do. Let's suppose we wanted to change it. Let's suppose we didn't want to say add all the whole numbers from 1 to 1,000. Let's suppose we wanted to add all the even numbers from 100 to 200. 100 to 200. And I'll make it just the even numbers. Okay, so this time I don't want to make the starting value 1, I'd make a starting value 100, so I could put in 100 here. Okay, and I don't want to make a last value of 1001, I'll make it 200. But then remember, it won't actually reach 200, so I have to go beyond 200, so I'll make it 201. Okay, one problem here. This is going to add up all the numbers from 100 to 200, but we wanted to just add the even numbers. Okay, so you might know about even numbers. We get the even numbers if we add 2 each time. So if we start off at 100, the next one will be 100 plus 2, which is 102. Then we'd add 2 again to get 104, 2 again to get 106. So we can actually change how much we go up by each time in the for loop by putting in a comma here and then 2, how much we go up by. You might hear some people call it the step size. Now you don't have to put in a value there if you are only going up by 1 each time. It will assume you're going up by 1 each time, but if you wanted to change the step size, then you would have to do that. Now, okay, let's try this in. I'm going to save it and run, and let's see how it goes. So at the beginning it says the total was 100, so the first number we added was 100. Then we added, let's see, 102 to that. Then we added 104. Then we added 106. So you can see the number we're adding is going up by 2 each time. So 100 plus 102 gives 202, plus 104 gives 306. Go all the way down to the very last one, and what have we got? 7650. The counter is now 200. So we ended up on 200 as we wanted. Okay, so there's several other situations where you might want to use a counter in a for loop, and I'm sure we'll come across others as well. But in the meantime, there is the other type of loop, a while loop, that we should look at as well, and we will do that next. Thank you for watching.